today we are going to do something different. I brought in my third guest of EHPN, David Beers. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So while I'm trying to learn fantasy football, I'm reading all these magazines, I'm looking at all these online sites, and I don't know what to do. Everyone has their different opinions, so I brought in a fantasy expert here to talk about how to rank these players and the strategies on what positions to pick first, what positions to hold back on.
Well, fantasy expert, that's a lofty title. I'll be sure to mention that to my wife next time she reminds me that I've been spending a little too much time on fantasy football.
Our format for this show is we're going to get into top 10 running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. And then to end the show, we'll get into the strategies that we think you should use in your upcoming drafts. So, my first question, David, who is your top 10 running back?
Well, top 10 running back, Ray Rice, Arian Foster at the top. These are the kind of running backs you want. Lots of catches, lots of yards, do it all. Chris Johnson, number 3rd, is one of my breakout candidates, or re-breakout candidates, if you will, and we'll get into him in a second. 4th, I've got LaShawn McCoy. 5th, Ryan Matthews. 6th, Darren McFadden, and 7th, DeMarco Murray. And we're going to talk about those 3 together as talented guys, a little bit injury prone, could win you your league, could lose you your league. Yes. Number 8, Forte, old reliable. Number 9, Trent Richardson, the rookie. And number 10, Steven Jackson, another solid veteran who has a heavy workload.
Oh yeah,
his way.
He's a horse.
All right, that's my top 10.
So why, for me, I'm looking at your list right now, McFadden to me is pretty high.
I believe, let me just say, when he plays, he's top 5, and he could easily, would you be surprised if he finished the year number 1 overall?
I would be.
Just
yes.
Because he didn't get hurt?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Sometimes with fantasy, you gotta roll the dice. I would say Ray Rice, Arian Foster, sure things. LaShawn McCoy, sure thing. I like Chris Johnson a lot. After that, nothing but question marks. And then you got your Darren McFadden, as we said. He's hurt every year, but this could be the year he puts it together, and if he does, he could win your league.
I hope so. He's shown so much talent. It's just unfortunate what's happened to him every year.
And what I would say is this: if you're going to draft a guy like McFadden, your other running back should be Steven Jackson. It should be somebody that's dependable, or even a Sproles, somebody who's reliable, who you know is going to be involved.
So speaking of Sproles, I'm surprised you left him off your top 10. I think this guy's going to have a monster season. Despite him having a limited number of touches, he did a lot with it. He was still the 8th best running back in the league. And with Sean Payton out, Drew Brees is going to be controlling the offense, and that's going to really benefit Sproles a lot.
Yeah, I like that call. I couldn't get him into my top 10, but he's right outside knocking on the door. And yeah, his touches were low last year. They could go up, and a few more touches with Darren Sproles could mean a few more touchdowns.
So what about another guy I think should be on the top 10 list, that's off your list, is Maurice Jones-Drew.
Okay, all right. Well, most people have him as high as 4th, but I am very wary of holdouts. Last situation with a holdout that I can remember was Chris Johnson a couple years ago, and he came in out of shape, got hurt, was never the same, and so yeah, I just let somebody else take that risk.
Okay, yeah, no, I see your point, but I think he's a very talented player, so even if he's not in 100% shape by the start of the season, I think he won't be as good as last year, but I think he'll still be that game changer. And they don't have many options in Jacksonville, so I think he's the guy.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
So who is your running back sleeper this year?
Well, I would have to say Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith for Detroit, just because there's nobody else there. Javid Best has still not been cleared to play. Mikel Shore was a rookie last year, was injured, and he was smoking pot this offseason, and so no other way to say it. And he's suspended for 2 games. Kevin Smith is a starter, and when he played last year, he put up some really big numbers. So you can get him in the 10th round or later. He's going to be a starter. And Detroit, yes, they throw a lot, but they also score a lot, and Smith is a good receiver. So I like him.
David, who is your top 10 right now?
Well, my top 10 list of prima donnas, wide receivers, sorry, my bad. Calvin Johnson, undisputed number 1, Megatron. Larry Fitzgerald, number 2. We both agree on that.
Yeah.
Then it comes Julio Jones and AJ Green, Jordy Nelson. Those are all young, talented wide receivers. 6, Brandon Lloyd. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in a minute. Victor Cruz, number 7. I think he's for real. Brandon Marshall, number 8. We're definitely going to talk about him in a minute. Wes Welker and Antonio Brown, number 10. Bit of surprise.
David, who jumps out at you the most on your list?
Well, I'm going to talk about Julio Jones because you know about Megatron. Everybody knows he rules. But Julio Jones, let me just throw a little Julio Jones knowledge at you. In games where Julio Jones caught 3 balls or more last year, he averaged around 97 yards and a touchdown. The guy's unstoppable. And with the whole preseason to prepare this year, training camp, which they didn't have last year because of the holdout, the lockout, yeah, I like it. Sky's the limit for Julio. And I will just say that he'll slide a little bit. You don't have to pick him as the 3rd or 4th receiver off the board. He may slide down to you in the late 3rd, 4th round, and you can jump on him. And could be a total home run there.
Oh, definitely. So Brandon Lloyd's another guy that's pretty high on your list. Why did you pick him?
Well, quite frankly, the Patriots lit it up last year with no deep threat. Brandon Lloyd was number 1 fantasy receiver in the league a couple years back with Kyle Orton. That's Kyle Orton. This year, he's playing with Tom Brady. You may have heard of Tom Brady. He's pretty good. So, yeah, they've got 2 tight ends. They've got Welker, but they've got no deep threat. Brandon Lloyd, I expect big things this year. And I'll just say, the Patriots, I think everybody's going to put up big numbers. Tom Brady might break a couple records this year. So I would be comfortable with any Patriot. Wes Welker, I've got him at 9. I don't hate him either. So.
Yeah. No, anybody on New England, Green Bay, get him.
That's right. It's always a good idea to go with high-scoring offenses.
So, for me, there's a couple of question marks with your top 10. Brandon Marshall at number 8. I think he's going to be the biggest bust, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. There's no doubt he has talent, but it's his attitude. Every offseason you hear Brandon Marshall did something. Why do you think he's going to have such a good season this year?
Well, my friend, that's why I wore this jersey here today. This, number 15, is not a Tim Tebow, it's a Brandon Marshall because he used to play in Denver. And when he played in Denver, he also wore number 15 and he played with a guy named Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler, also the quarterback in Chicago. They brought along Jeremy Bates, who apparently is Cutler and Marshall's BFF forever because he draws up a master plan for them. And when Cutler and Marshall were together, Brandon Marshall was good for 100 catches and 1,200 yards every year. And I just think that Chicago has been desperate for a number 1 wide receiver. With Brandon Marshall, they're going to throw him the ball a lot. And Cutler and Marshall are like this. So I just think, again, with wide receiver being so deep, once you get down there to 8 or 10, yeah, he's a guy that I think you can count on. I think he's actually pretty safe, except for the knucklehead factor. But, wide receivers, half of them are knuckleheads, so I don't know, what are you going to do?
And then number 10, I'm surprised with Antonio Brown.
Who? Antonio who?
Yeah, a lot of analysts, even magazines online, they don't mention anything about Antonio Brown in the top 10, and you have him in your top 10. And I think it's an interesting pick, and why? Please go into that.
Well, Antonio Brown, over the last 8 games of last year, was the leading receiver for the Steelers. He was more productive than Mike Wallace. He was voted the team MVP after the year was over. And he is in training camp right now with the new contract, learning the new offense. They have a new coordinator, Todd Haley. Mike Wallace is holding out, and he's at home eating Cheerios and playing Sega. So he's, give me the guy who's learning the offense, who's in camp, who's coming on at the end of last year, and he's a hard worker. Everyone likes him. And yeah, give me Antonio Brown. His touchdowns were low last year. I think they'll come up this year. So he's a guy that I think you can wait till 20 receivers are off the board. You can get Antonio Brown in the 6th round and be really confident at starting him.
And he's probably eventually, if the Mike Wallace holdout continues, he's probably going to be the number 1 receiver this year.
That's